Dear all, my name is Jotte de Koning and thanks for tuning in. Today I will be talking about design and transition management and their value of synergy for sustainability. So I'm talking about these two fields today, design and transition management, because both are in pursuit of sustainable futures. And at this moment in time, they've come to a point where they're pursuing the same ideas, but from different backgrounds. Design with the origin in design engineering and the applied arts, while management having a background in complex systems theory and evolutionary theory. Well, in the field of design, there are different movements and approaches emerging and maturing that also recognize this combined value of transition studies and design. This is in contemporary movements of design for sustainability, but also in the more young field of transition design or systemic design. It's not maybe an accident that I ended up analyzing the different fields, because in my PhD before I focused very much on design for sustainability in the context actually of Vietnam. And afterwards I went on doing a postdoc in the field of transition management and participatory design at Drift, which is an institute run by Dirk Loorbach and Jan Rotmans, one of the founders of the transition management approach. And the combination of my background has made me to write this paper that I'm presenting to you today. So I will tell you a little bit about design for sustainability, about transition management, and then about 6 values of synergy that I have identified, along with 4 possible pitfalls that we have to watch out for when we would want to apply the synergy in practice. So in design for sustainability, there we have seen evolution, and Cheskin and Gaziluzoy have presented a paper that very well depicts this evolution towards now. What you see in the top corner, a focus on socio-technical systems and more people-focused and systemic. And here you see design for systems, innovations, and transitions. Here you already see that in design for sustainability, the focus is really towards topics that also transition management or transition studies deal with. In these different movements of design for sustainability, which I will use as an overall term that also includes transition design, systemic design. Just for means of clarity, I will call it design for sustainability. These different movements of design that deal with these sustainability transitions all have in common that they embrace complexity instead of dealing with it, that they focus on societal challenges, and that their aim is to create societal impact through systemic change. In practice, this means that designers have to deal with indeterminacies and incompleteness in their future designs and deliberately make that a part of the infrastructure that they are designing, leaving space free for anticipated events that will come in the use phase or later on. This transition design is one of the movements that really advocates this, and transition design framework is quite recently developed, and there you see that actually ideas of transition studies and transition management are heavily being referred to. Well, in practice, design is consisting of different diverging and converging steps. I think I'm talking here to a design audience mostly, so that you might be familiar with. Within this design process, different possible frames or solutions are modeled, constructed, and experimented with, prototype, and often from a human-centered perspective. You see already that design is a very solution-oriented practice. Some people describe this as navigating between the solution and the problem space, trying to bring them together. Other people say it's gradually adding detail and complexity to a solution space, or widening and narrowing a problem space to get to the solution. And during this process, designers are very well equipped to deal with ambiguity and uncertainty. Well, then on the other hand, the field of transition studies. This is a field that's relatively young, but in the last decades, it has really produced a lot more followers, scholars, and articles. Within transition studies, transition management is actually one of the key approaches. You can see here a figure of Markart and others that identify the 4 key frameworks in transition studies. And there you see that transition management at the top is one of them. Really, and you can already see, focusing on governance of sustainability transitions. Well, transition management is, as I said, a governance approach to sustainable development. It's based on notions of complex systems theory, and these notions are, for example, selection, emergence, co-evolution, and self-organization. And it deals with persistent problems, which is the superlative form of what Rittel and Weber refer to as wicked problems, or in design, ill-structured problems. And the overall aim of transition management is to create space for short-term innovation, but also develop long-term sustainability visions. In practice, transition management consists of 4 different types of activities, which is strategic activities, tactical, operational, and reflexive activities. These activities are often structured around, to begin with, a transition arena. This is a non-physical space. This is where front runners come together. Front runners around the same topic of sustainability. Together, they structure the problem and create a long-term vision. With this group of front runners in the transition arena, after that, there are coalitions built and networks. They're building agendas on the political side also, and transition paths really set out on creating change. Then on the operational activities, we'll start with experimenting and interventions and short-term projects, really mobilizing actors to do something in their context. Last of all, transition management also consists of reflexive activities, and these consist of monitoring and evaluation of progress, as well as the process and the content of the transition path that you seek out, leading to adaptation, ongoing adaptation of the sustainability vision during all the activities. So you see that both practices have very different approaches to actually the same goal, sustainability. And I will present you 6 values. The first possible value is enriched methods of retrieving knowledge of current objects and current systems, because design has its own distinct things to know and ways of knowing them and ways of finding out about them. And through different design methods, for example, contextual inquiry or context mapping, designers can add knowledge of these current objects and current systems to the transition arenas where the future visions are developed. Second, design can provide boundary objects in these transition arenas beyond language games, because these transition arenas, they rely heavily on words and discussions, but they also aim to produce images of the futures, and this is something designers are really equipped to do. And designers can also bring it beyond these images actually towards a boundary object, such as a mock-up, prototype, or a design game. And these types of objects could bind the different language games of people discussing together, and make the people with often different perspectives actually are able to talk about their commonalities, while actually acknowledging that different stakeholders also hold different views at the same time. Third, for design, actually, it could be a benefit in learning from transition management to actively envision the effect of their design things during and beyond their lifetime. Connecting design to practice of transition management would allow for more heavily embedded practices of envisioning the future and anticipating of future trends and developments. Transition management principles can help designers to think about and really be part of a transition, as well as realizing the power they have of shaping the future, and so also potentially the negative power they might have if they use their power wrong. Hereby, designers can be possibly averted from the danger of optimizing the wrong system by not fundamentally questioning the need for certain industrialized production or the levels of consumption associated with these systems. Fourth, design could benefit from transition management activities, from gaining intensified reflexivity in their practices and projects. This reflexivity could stimulate the maturation of the transition design practice that is emerging, and also formulate as well as understand the new role of the designer within these sustainability transitions. Fifth, professional designers can be understood as leaving traces, obstacles, objects, and maybe public things for users to enact in their everyday activities. And following this understanding, design could add value to transition strategies, not only through their value in these operational experiments and activities, but also in strategic and tactical activities, leaving traces, objects, and other things for people, not only the front runners, but people in everyday life, to enact these changes. So leaving traces of these transition activities. Last, both in design and transition management, there is an emphasis on co-creation and participation activities. And both fields could learn from the diverse methods and experiences of the other. In participatory design, the focus is traditionally on envisioning use before use, but now it's moving towards design after design, actually, where other people will have to act and design their own futures also. In this move towards design after design, there is much to learn from the tactical activities of transition management, where there is a great focus on creating interactions and coalitions. So this sounds very great, but in actually combining the two in practice, there's also some pitfalls to look out for. First, designers should not be treated as the visualizers of the transition managers, and therefore not be involved in the higher level abstract thinking, because that will not result in the crossover learning. Designers will learn from the practice of creating a long-term future vision and interactions for it. On the other hand, transition managers will not benefit from learning from bound objects and leaving traces in everyday life. On the other hand, design could also be used only for generating new ideas in the experimentation phase, where there's the most obvious role for design, but not throughout the process. Again, this would not create mutual and crossover learning. Last, there are two pitfalls of transition management being overly focused on everyday life and operational activities. This could make it too concrete, losing some of the ideology of the long-term future visions. In connection to this, transition management could then also be criticized too much on the execution part, because also too much is expected from the experimentation in the seeding transition arena. And if there's a lot expected from all the activities, then it could also create disappointment on the level of experimentation or implementation actually reached in the execution phase, and this could spur disbelief in the whole transition path together. So these pitfalls are something to look out for, to overcome. But for now, it's very necessary to actually start experimenting in practice of how these 6 values of synergy can come out. Hopefully, you're inspired to do something with this, and thank you for listening.